As the Apostle Paul closes his letter to the church in Rome, he exhorts them to transformation. That is, to put into practice the teaching of Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. As far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Now, living peaceably, Jesus says, requires personal responsibility and communal discernment. But what does that look like? What is possible? And what depends on you? Welcome to Engaging Conflict Redemptively, your roadmap to patience and peace in a quick-fix, antagonistic world. I'm Jim Van Yperen, your instructor for this series, and this is my good friend Lucy, your host.
Hi there, I'm Lucy. Let me start by answering a question you're probably wondering about. Why is a dog hosting this video? Well, apparently, and Jim told me this himself, dogs are by nature what all humans are striving to become: joyful, truthful, and unconditionally loving, at least most of the time. Plus, I'm being paid in games of frisbee. But enough about me. Let me tell you about who Jim is and why he created these videos. Jim Van Yperen is a speaker, author, and consultant to Christian leaders and organizations. In 1993, Jim and his wife Sharon answered the call to help one local church in conflict. Little did they know then that this would be their calling for the next 2 decades. They learned a lot, mostly the hard way, like how things can blow up fast, and how personal brokenness is a prerequisite for living peaceably. Today, Jim and Sharon have served more than 95 churches across North America and beyond, large churches and small churches in 45 different denominations. Plus, they've provided training to Christian leaders and organizations around the globe. In other words, they've seen a lot of stuff. They've worked with people when they were at their worst and ugliest and meanest.
But despite serving many thousands of diverse people, we found one thing universally common. Most Christians have never been taught in how to live peaceably in conflict, like how to deal with backstabbers and mud throwers. Sadly, every church seems to have antagonistic people of one sort or another.
People like Mr. Windbag, Miss Never Change, and Dr. Know-It-All.
But the biggest problem we found, what people find most difficult to deal with, is the man or woman staring back at them in the mirror. The truth is, most of your conflict starts with you.
Of course, we dogs know about conflict and how conflict reveals what's in your heart. But most humans will do anything they can do to avoid conflict until it's too late.
Which is why we humans keep finding ourselves in conflict, because your heart won't rest until you find peace. That's why we wanted to create this video series, so you can discover the joy of living peaceably with others and with yourself.
Like me and my friend Molly. So, where do you want to start, Jim?
Well, Lucy, we've discovered 5 dynamic turning points that are common to every conflict. 5 critical points that will determine the outcome of each conflict. In fact, responding well to each turning point has the power to transform your life, transform your marriage, your friendships, your family, your work with difficult people, and even transform a whole community if people are willing. Each turning point will tell you what is possible and offers a choice. You can choose to respond well or not so well.
In this session, Jim will briefly describe each turning point. Then, in following sessions, we'll slow down and explore each point more deeply. Okay?
So, here are the 5 dynamic turning points of conflict. Picture yourself here. This is you. Understanding conflict starts with you. Or, as I'd like to say, all conflict is history. Your first thoughts, feelings, and actions in conflict come from your past. We'll call this your backstory. Your backstory is how you view your life through a narrative, a story. It's the story of who you are and what you want others to think about you. You might think of your backstory as a kind of movie of your life, all your best experiences and worst memories, your selected joys, selected fears, selected hurts and wounds. The key word here is selected. Your backstory is what you choose to remember, or what you can't forget because of hurt, betrayal, or unreconciled relationships, or perhaps some injustice that you're especially sensitive to. In a word, your backstory is about your desire, what you love and long for.
Jim will explain desire and why it's important in the next video.
That's right, Lucy, but for now, I want to explain why your backstory is important. So, imagine that you're living in your story, going about your merry way, minding your own business, when, boom, something suddenly disrupts your peace and throws you off balance. Maybe someone says something hurtful or does something that hits a nerve and taps into a sore point from your past, something painful or lost, something that threatens your desire. Do you know the feeling? We call this a catalytic event. A catalytic event can be big or small, but it triggers a strong emotion. Emotion is dynamic turning point number 1. The emotion is immediate, automatic, and can come without warning. Suddenly, you're overwhelmed with feelings. You don't think about what you're feeling or why, you just feel. Blood pressure shoots up, you're filled with anxiety.
Ugh, I hate it when that happens. So conflict triggers emotion, but is it always the same emotion?
Typically, conflict triggers one or more of 4 negative emotions: fear, anger, guilt, or shame.
We'll explore these emotions more deeply in session 4.
That's right, but what you need to know now is that your emotions lead directly to dynamic turning point number 2, reaction. Here again, your response may be immediate, spontaneous, and often unconscious. Your emotions sound an alarm, so you do what you always do when threatened.
My go-to place is under the bed.
Well, most people try to make their anxiety go away as quickly as possible. We call this a quick fix. And if you're not aware of this dynamic, you can spend a long time reacting, then reacting more, and reacting to your reactions. And the longer you spend reacting, the deeper your conflict and emotions will be, until you can't stand the stress any longer. So, you make a decision, which is dynamic turning point number 3. Well, sadly, your decision is usually separation. You want to get as far away as possible. So, you run away. You quit your job, you file for divorce, or leave your church. And you probably don't go quietly. You gossip and blame, maybe even try to recruit others to your side. But separation is the wrong direction. It's wrong because fleeing cannot resolve your conflict. Of course, you'll tell yourself you're right and that fleeing is your only option, which leads to dynamic turning point number 4, justification. Here's how justification often works. You know deep inside that you're not completely innocent. You said or did some wrong things too, and you know that you should stay and try to work things out, but you didn't listen to your conscience. You ran away. The tension between these competing ideas, staying or leaving, increases your anxiety. So, to make your anxiety go away, you justify your decision. You say things like,
What they did to me is so much worse than what I did to them.
or,
I'm not the kind of person who gets angry and runs away. They forced me to.
you tell yourself you're good when you're actually acting badly. To justify yourself, you start seeing the world through self-deceiving eyes. You cannot see or hear or speak the truth completely. Meanwhile, self-deception and self-justification move you further and further from reality. In fact, self-deception and self-justification become your reality, which takes us to turning point number 5, formation. You see, your injustice towards others and their injustice toward you leaves deep emotional wounds. Bitterness, anger, and regret take root in your heart and begin to form your character. You start thinking and acting like a victim, or maybe a lone crusader, the only one who sees clearly. But bitterness is blinding you and writing another caustic chapter to your backstory that sets you up for deeper anxiety and worse reactions when boom, the next catalytic event comes along.
Okay, I've got the picture. Each negative reaction builds on the one before.
Yes, making the conflict deeper and more difficult for you to be reconciled or to heal. You get caught in a vicious cycle that you can't even see, so you blame others, increasing your blindness and misery. And over time, slowly but surely, bitterness takes root, and the capacity to hate grows in your heart.
You become one of those people who are miserable to live with. You don't want to be miserable to live with, do you?
Well, thankfully, there is another way. You can learn how to be patient, joyful, and truthful in an antagonistic world.
You can live peaceably, like Molly and me. And we'll tell you how, beginning in session number 2 of Engaging Conflict Redemptively. And after I get paid for this session. We invite you to join us. See you then. Bye.